What is up, YouTube? I have something special for you today. We are going to be building the prototype for Murders at Tealwoods Manor, our game project that I've been working on for a while. We did have an existing prototype that we brought to PAX in 2022. It had really nice wooden boards, had all these really nice components, but we've changed how the game looks since then, and I have to rebuild the entire thing, and I figured that would be something kind of cool that you might want to see. You might get to see some of what my day-to-day arts and crafts looks like. Let's set this up so you can kind of see what I'm doing. First thing is this is going to be our game box at some point, as well as the player screens. But what I'm going to do first is the rule booklet. And the rule booklet is going to be very easy because I have a book for it already. I have a special insert sleeve display book. And I have a glue stick that I might need later. And that's it. But we'll do this first. So this is our rule book pages, and then this is our cards that we're going to cut out later. So I'll come back to that. But so normally, as you can see, there's nothing on the back of these. Normally you would have page 1 and page 8, and then on the back, page 2 and page 7, but because I couldn't do that, I've just got everything on the front, and we're just going to stuff them into this display, because that is going to just look nice, I think, for the average person. And it means I don't have to worry about binding it. It means I don't have to... Look, the whole goal is that I don't have to do anything any more complicated than an 8-year-old would have to do. So whenever my friends suggest that I do leather working or some ridiculous thing, I'm like, no, dude. I'm not going to do that. Which happens a lot. I'm like, I have this problem. I'm trying to make this thing. And they're like, have you considered getting a degree as a welder? I'm like, well, no, obviously. I'm just going to stuff these in here. This is some of the fantastic and lovely graphics design from David Richards that really conveys our Art Deco style. Let me just stuff these all in here. What? And then our back page. And then we have the reference page. Oh, I've punched a hole in it. Okay. And our last page is the reference page, which goes on the back. So, this is what our rulebook looks like now. In a nice little display folder, right? You get all the different parts in here. And so, when I actually hand this to people or I show them, it actually looks nice. Which is kind of cool. But, ow. I just stabbed myself with a rubber band. I might be able to just roll it off. This is the hard part. And what I think will be most interesting for the video. There we go. As there's a lot of different pieces in here. Okay, first up we've got the box. This thing's huge. It's bigger than me. I've become the board game. Alright, let me put that on the floor. Over here, Jesus Christ. For reference, I'm 6'5". That poster's A0 or B1 or something. So this is the box. And the box is not the right size, as you can see. But we're going to mock it up so that we have something to show of what it will look like. Whereas all the other stuff does look to be the correct size. All of the Actually, let's start with that. Let's put this on the floor. All of these files come from the print previews of the manufacturer. So that they were just made for me to look at, not actually the thing that is printing. Like, it's just the, hey, check this works. And normally I would just be using the sample that they're going to provide me. But it's not going to be ready in time. So to save a lot of time, I've sped up some of these parts. This bit in particular, I am cutting out the box because the paper it is printed on is pretty flimsy. I am then gluing it to a 200 GSM cardboard backing and then trying to kind of fold it up and then glue in some extra supports, but it didn't really come together that well. Okay, let's let that dry, do something else, and then come back to it. So I'll put you over here, and you, for now. And then, do I want to get started on tokens? I could get started on tokens, but I might do the cards first. Now the cards got printed on a thicker stock. I don't know how obvious this is going to be, but you can't really tell. But this is 300 GSM. For clarity, Magic cards are 350 GSM. And these will be okay. Normally, I would use the guillotine for this, but because they're a bit thicker, the guillotine has some trouble. Also, I'm going to recline, because leaning over the table hurts my back too much. I'll just cut them and make a pile, I guess. Then I've got some sleeves for the pile. As you can see, I live a very relaxed lifestyle as a game designer. It's all sitting around. But while I'm doing this, I wanted to talk about the game. Now, Murders at Tealwoods Manor is a game part of a trend of mine where I would take an existing game and have a look at ways of reinventing it or modernizing it or finding new interpretations of the genre, right? So most obviously, Letter Drop is a game that I made, which is Connect 4 meets Scrabble. So you're placing the discs into the grid, and the discs have letters on them, and you're trying to make words, which is like literally the most easiest. What's the two things that come together when you have these two games? Now, Murders at Tealwoods Manor is different in that obviously there's not two games being mixed together here. Also, it's kind of, I guess it's more of a reinterpretation, right? Like, you've got some of the core concepts there, the theme, like the murder mystery. Any one of the guests could be the murderer, which is like a design thing that you have to be conscious of. Then you've got the cast of characters, each of which has a unique color identity. We have 13 characters. Just for example, here's 3 of them. We've got white, gold, and brown. That is Price, Pelham, and Tealwoods. Lady Tealwoods is the host, but like the host in canon, in the actual gameplay, the host could be any of the characters. And so each of them has a distinct color identity to help you identify them. And then you've got in Cluedo, you care a lot about the murder weapon and the location. This less so, but the different rooms of the manor are important. The different rooms of the manor are how you activate different abilities during the game. And so it's a bit more like a worker placement game, except your workers might get murdered. Like, they might be the murder victims. Which is, yeah, the original concept of the design that I really liked was having the floor plan of the manor and having the guests as like a punch card or whatever that you could place into a room. And then based on which room they were in was whether or not they would be murdered. This. I have a bunch of reminder cards because I get hassled whenever I have a game that doesn't have reminder cards, even if it's a very small game. So I put all of the information in the game on the reminder cards, and there's one for each player, including the guest list. The guest list, which is literally just a list of everyone's names, because there is one of the rooms in particular where you have to name a guest. And if you don't know all of the guests' names, then you can't bluff something beyond what you immediately care about, if that makes sense. Like, you give away information about your interests if you are unfamiliar with some of the characters that aren't in your immediate sphere of care, which bothers some people. Me being very objective focused is like, oh, just tell me the news. But it also helps people get familiar with the game, which I think is important. Back to the core design parts. I wanted to have it so that in Cluedo, the murder happens kind of off screen, and then you're trying to figure it out. In this, murders happen every hour and pile up over time. Oh no, that's come out really wonky. And pile up over time. And you know who the murderer is. Surprise, it's a reverse murder mystery. You know who the murderer is from the very start. But there's a character in the game who is the investigator that is trying to solve the murder mystery. And throughout the course of the game, either the investigator solves the murder and saves the lives of others by killing the murderer, or the murderer kills a bunch of people and then escapes at midnight. So there's this kind of clock where you're either trying to help the investigator solve the murder or let the murderer kill everyone based on your secret goals. Like is very common in games like It's a Ride, Sagrada, Moonshell, one of my favorites, where you have a secret goal that says if you do this thing you'll get points. Each player has a list of secret goals, which is, and I'll show you on this sheet, you can see at the top, on that top row, you've got this little symbol at the bottom of each card, and that will indicate whether you want that character to die or live. So if you have a card that says you want them to live, you need them to not get murdered. If you have a card that says the murderer needs to die, you need the investigator not to solve the murder. If you have a card that says the investigator needs to die, you need the murderer to be able to kill them before the investigator solves the murder. And then at the end of the game, based on which guests die, you score points. And so rather than you... What is going on? Oh, I've missed a little nick. Rather than you trying to solve the mystery yourself, you are influencing the characters of the game solving the mystery. Which means that there's no like complete random moment. There's no like kind of a setup thing where no one knows what's going on, or you have like a game runner or narrator, like in some werewolf games that require a moderator, where it's like they have to know what everything is, and there's no like no eyes open, eyes closed kind of thing, but there isn't teams in this game, so we don't need to really do anything like that. But I wanted to have a pure deduction part where there's still mystery in the game. Like, you don't know where all the guests are because they are drafted and placed face down. And because you don't know where all the guests are, you don't know where the murderer is. And if the murderer is alone with another guest, then they'll kill them. And you don't want that to happen sometimes. You do want that to happen sometimes. And guests move around a lot. They gossip to each other. They, chat and drink or whatever because they think it's a party. And the murderer secretly murders people as it goes along. What do I do there? That's caught the light in a weird way. Oh, it's just the black ink is very heavy. Okay, actually looks alright. This printing, it is a little bit dark, but that's to be expected. Normally, the going from digital files to physical print, you'll get between 10 and 20% darker. It's pretty standard. These I am happy to be a little bit darker because the overall tone of the game is a murder mystery. Like, it's not super happy unicorn fun time. It's fine for it to come across as a little dark, but a lot of the character design, because the colors are so unique, that it's going to be difficult for them to overlap in a confusing way anyway. Like, so there's like several points of contact to identify a character. Each of them has a very unique design, but also has the different primary color, and also each card has the character's name on it at the top. Which helps you identify them pretty easily. But a lot of the time, your secret goals you don't need to be looking at all the time. You can kind of just memorize the one or two characters that you care about in the moment. And what tends to happen is because the way that the turns play out, there's sort of a learning things phase and a trying to do things phase that comes over the turns of the game. Here we go. It's quite thick at the end. What we're going to do now is we're going to grab some sleeves, and then I think we're going to have to cut them down in size again to fit into the sleeves, because I think that it is slightly bigger than poker. This next sped up section is the second longest of them, where I am cutting up all of the different cards that go into the game. There is 26 different objective cards, and then 13 different key character cards, as well as 4 reminder cards per player, so that is 16. That all come together, and then I am stealing the pink sleeves off one of my no longer played MTG EDH decks to then sleeve this project. That is something that happens a lot, stealing from one thing to feed another. And I'm putting it all together so that all the cards are nice and sleeved, so it is easier on the players for when they are using the cards while playing the game.
Do you hear me making breakfast in the morning?
Because I'm asleep.
Also, I go out of my way to make sure I'm not making a dark noise.
Oh. I'm the king of going back to sleep whenever I'm tired.
Yeah. Just not waking up.
My body just sleeps when I want to.
Well done. That's on camera as well. That's the most embarrassing part.
Yeah, I get to self-own myself about it later. And then once I'm done hanging out with my roommate, I go and try and glue all of the parts of the player screen together, which is quite difficult because it is smaller than A4. I had to cut each of the different 3 sections quite awkwardly and glue it all together to try and build something. But unfortunately, because of the way that the glue dries onto the combination of paper and cardboard, it has warped quite a lot. And the white sections that you do actually see on there in the frames is supposed to hold a card. So I would glue a sleeve onto that and then put a card into that sleeve. But because I don't have a lot of confidence in the structural integrity of this particular print, I won't be using it. However, if something more like a DM screen, because they are much more rigid, So the final prototype will have a much better version, but this one in particular is just for show. Then with our last section, I am cutting up all of the gossip tokens and the investigator tokens. The gossip tokens were a late stage addition to the game, which is a tiebreaker type mechanic, but also a currency in which players are able to do extra actions in the game. So when you receive gossip tokens, it has a number on the back, and the number on the back is the sort of a value that will help break the ties at the end of the game. But you can spend the gossip tokens that you don't want in order to reveal characters' locations on the board, which is kind of like trading gossip for information. So it's highly thematic, and it gives an extra layer of things that you're able to do on your turn into the game, and it really was the cherry on top that we were looking for when finalizing the playtesting for the final version of the game. This here, I am just gluing them onto poker chips to match the same size as the character tokens, but also to give it a kind of a rigid feel to it for the final version, and then using sticky tape to stick the top and bottom sides together so that it will last after a few plays. A lot of this printout stuff, and you can see later on when you see the damage to my hands and the ink that I have on myself, that they don't super last after being rubbed a few times. So having that layer of sticky tape on there is a bit of extra protection that will help it last for the heavy play that it's going to receive at conventions whilst showing off the game. Okay. We've got the clue tokens here. I'm trying to make sure it's in frame. We've got the board, which has the different characters' roles on top of it, as well as the clock. But we're going to be using a different version when we're actually showing off the game, because this one I don't think is sturdy enough to really handle it. We've got the board, and this is how the board would go. Up against the player screen, so you can see the different rooms. We've got the character tokens, and they would be in each room like this. We've got the character cards. That would signify the key characters in the game. Got the box, sort of. And we've got the gossip tokens. So that's the box front. This is sort of all of the components together. Just to give you an idea of what it kind of looks like at the end. It's actually quite exhausting putting it all together. The scissor work is a huge pain. You can't really notice it when you look at it now, but that's bruising just from using the scissors so much. Like the redness of my thumb and stuff as well. And I'm just covered in ink. I don't know if you can... Yeah, you can see that. Top of my thumb's completely black. So it's kind of a lot to go through and put it all together. But the idea is to build an experience that really shows off the game in a close to final state as possible, so that when you're showing it off to people, they can get a pretty close idea for what they think the final product is going to be. I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. I'm going to be using the old wooden boards instead of the new cardboard ones that I made, because the cardboard ones aren't very sturdy and I think they'll just get destroyed straight away. And the ink rubs on everything that I haven't covered in tape, and the tape isn't wide enough to cover the whole board in one go. It'll look really untidy. So I'm going to do that. The box I just kind of built just to show off for the video. It's not very practical. But what that does mean is that we'll be able to make some video content with a really playable version of the game. You can really get a good look at how it all works, how it all comes together, and really get a taste for how the game plays. This video I made more as a way to show off kind of what I'm doing in my designer ish designer and all the other jobs that I do in the process kind of role for this project, where you get to see the different parts of how it comes together. You get to see how all the art comes together, the decisions that go into the art. In, like, for example, I did an interview with Billy Blue. We went through and talked about a whole bunch of stuff about the project. I'll put a link to that video up here somewhere. And then you get to see me building it now, and then hopefully when I show off some of this game, I'll get to get you some video footage of that, and you can actually see it getting played with this version that I've built, and you can kind of start to see the pieces of the journey and how it all comes together. So hopefully you enjoyed watching this. It was an entire day putting this video together. And if you do like it, I do have a bunch of other board game designer, just some regular just board game content, whole bunch of different stuff on this channel worth checking out. I'll have a bunch of buttons up here worth clicking, but for me, the button worth clicking the most is that subscribe button, and I would also appreciate that a lot. But hopefully you're excited about Murders at Tealwoods Manor, just like I am. I'm hoping to get you a whole bunch more content to have a look at soon, so definitely keep your eyes peeled for that.